Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Now then, we're going to go back to where we started. Just a very, very brief recap. We are starting to look at the life of Joseph and how all this applies to us thousands of years later. Because believe it or not, man and woman have not changed one bit at all. Neither has God changed at all. So we looked last week at Joseph's family. Jacob, known to everyone who reads the Bible as the twister and the schemer and the deceiver. He had all these boys in his family. And these boys were going to become the 12 tribes of Israel, which when you look at this real dysfunctional family is the grace of God. And that's all it is, the grace of God. That he was prepared to use such as these for their names to be the 12 tribes of Israel. Because they came from different mothers, same father, Jacob, but different mothers. And so there was a lot of bickering and there was a lot of scheming, just like their father, going on. So to help matters, what Jacob did was he made a coat. He made an expensive tunic for Joseph. And he gave it to him publicly. Do you think that helped? Do you think favouritism in a family helps? Never does, never will. It divides. And when he gave him the coat, the Bible, as we read it last week, said the brothers hated him. And then Joseph has dreams. And Joseph comes to his brothers, first of all, and says to them, listen to this dream I've had. And they thought, oh, there you go. So we got to listen to this dream. We were in the field, and your sheaves, my sheep was in the middle, and your sheaves all bowed down to me. Oh, that really helped. That really helped the situation. The Bible tells us they hated him even more. Then he had another dream. And he went to his father as well, and his brothers, and said, the stars were bowing down to my star. And even Jacob said, will your mother and myself be bowing down to you? And his brothers hated him even more. So if we had a thermometer, hatred is going, and when it comes to a point, it goes kaboom. Well, it did come to a point, because Jacob said to Joseph one day, I want you to go out to see your brothers and take them some food. Want to know how they're doing. They're looking after the flocks. So what did he do? I know, I better leave my garment back in the house, in the tent. Oh no, he put it on. And he went out to see his brothers. Found them eventually. And they said, as they saw him coming in the distance, because remember, this was a pure white garment with multicolour around the borders and everything. They could see him like a snowball coming at them. Look who's coming. The dreamer's coming. Let's kill him. Oh, lovely family, isn't it? It's a lovely family when your brothers want to kill you. And not just say, like perhaps we've said it in passing, and afterwards you think, oh, why did I say that? I got to kill him. They meant we want to kill him. So they threw him in a pit, into a dry well. And the scripture told us as well later on that he pleaded with them to come out, but they wouldn't listen. They were enjoying a meal. And then they heard the sound of camels come in, and the bells on the camels, and the Ishmaelites and the Midianites were coming. So they dragged him out of the pit, and they sold him to the Ishmaelites and the Midianites. And like we said, they gave him a nice carriage at the back that he could sit. He was special, see, wasn't he? They put a lovely carriage at the back for him to sit in so he could go all the way down to Egypt, did they? They put a rope around his neck and they dragged him with all the other slaves that they had there. Down in Egypt, as we read in chapter 39 last week, he was sold into the house of Potiphar, who was captain of the guard to Pharaoh, and he's there as a slave. The special boy has no longer got a voice because he's a slave, and the slave has no rights and no voice whatsoever. So he's there. And you wonder, what is going on here? If, like last week, I think the heading was, things can only get better. Because when we think that we're in a place of, utter despair, we say, oh, but things can only get better. But for Joseph, they got actually worse. They went down further. The thing is that when you're at the bottom, when you're really at the bottom, there's only one way you can look, isn't it? And that's up. You can look up. So Joseph now is in Potiphar's house. So we're going to read. I do apologize this morning. It's quite a long reading, but it will give us the picture of what we're going to look at for a few moments. We ended up at verse 5 in, verse 6 in chapter 39 of Genesis. We've got to carry on from verse 7. So what it says in verse 6 is, so Potiphar left all that he had in Joseph's hand. He did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate, and Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Okay. So he left, now in verse 7. Now it came to pass after these things that his master, Potiphar's wife, cast longing eyes on Joseph, and she said, lie with me, or go to bed with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in the house than I, nor has he kept anything back from me but you, because you are his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So it was, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not heed to her to lie with her or to be with her. Temptations like that, isn't it? Don't come to you once. It comes in tomorrow, and the afternoon, and the night. It's there all the time. But it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were inside, that she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. And so it was when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of the house and spoke to them, saying, see, he has brought into us a Hebrew to mock us. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. What a lying rat. What a lying rat. Let's be fair. She's lying through her teeth. So she kept his garment. Oh, there's a plan. So she kept his garment with her until his master came home. And she spoke to him with words like these, saying, the Hebrew servant who you brought in to us came in to me to mock me. So it happened as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside. So it was when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, your servant did to me after this manner, that his anger was aroused. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in prison. And the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's hand, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So, he's in prison. Now you think, can this be right? He's been wronged. He's been accused falsely, and he's in prison. Surely this is right outside of the will of God. This has got to be. Well, if we were to read the next chapter, I'll read the opening verses, shall we, of what's happening in chapter 40. But you tap 3 times on the ceiling when you want me. Chapter 40, it came to pass after these things that the butler and baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord the king of Egypt, and Pharaoh was angry with his 2 officers, the chief butler and the chief baker, so he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, the place where Joseph was confined. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, so they were in custody for a while. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, dreamed a dream, both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with his own interpretation. And Joseph came in to them in the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officers, who were with him in the custody of the Lord's house, saying, "Why do you look so sad today?" And they said to him, "We have each dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please." Then the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "Behold, my dream, in my dream a vine was before me, and in the vine there were 3 branches. It was as though it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. Then Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into the Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." And Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Now within 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your place. And you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand according to the former manner when you are with his butler. But remember me when it is well with you. And please show kindness to me, make mention of me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and also I have done nothing here that they should put me in the dungeon." Then the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good and said to Joseph, I also was in my dream, and there I had 3 white baskets in my hand. In the uppermost basket there were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket on my head. So Joseph answered and said, "This is the interpretation of it." I wonder if he gulped when he said this. "Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift off your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh from you." Now it came to pass on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. Then he restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Now then. So we've got a picture of what's going on here. So Joseph had done nothing but the best that he could in Potiphar's house. Now he was there, if you look at the timeline, if you read in there, he was roughly 10 years in Potiphar's house. In chapter 37 verse 2, he was 17 when he was thrown into the pit. In chapter 41 verse 46, he was 30 years old when he was brought in front of Pharaoh. So, hang about. Let's do a bit of math. 30, take away 17. 13, right, we got 13. But it says at the beginning, now I'll read this verse to you, first verse of chapter 41. It came to pass at the end of 2 full years. Take 2 off that. We're down to 11. So anything between 10 and 11 years, Joseph was in Potiphar's house. So you can imagine a good relationship had grown there. And the Bible tells us he had made, in chapter 39 verse 5, basically he made a fortune for his employer. Because everything he did was blessed by God. and everything was well in the house and in the field. So he made his employer a fortune. He'd adapted to a new culture. He learnt a new language. He actually resisted temptation, in fairness to him. And how was he rewarded? You think, now everything's going well. How was he rewarded? A prison sentence. And when it says in chapter 39, verse 20, he was put into the king's prison, that meant there was no chance of parole unless the king said so. You were there, and you would die there unless the king altered. So how did he get here, and why? Now keep remembering, as I mentioned last week, the key verse to the life of Joseph is in chapter 50, verse 20, where he says to his brothers, "You meant all this for evil, but God turned it to good." And that's the key verse to the life of Joseph, that God turns situations around. You see, God is not sometimes sovereign. He's not occasionally victorious. He doesn't occupy the throne one day and think, oh, I'll have all day, I'm off. He doesn't vacate it the next. In fact, in the Amplified Version, Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 24 says this, "The Lord will not turn back until he has executed and accomplished the thoughts and the intents of his heart." In other words, God is in control. Even in the chaos, God is still in control. Now, I don't know what season of life that you are in at the moment, or you don't know what season of life I'm in at the moment. It may be things are puzzling you. Why am I going through this? Why is this happening to me? Why are these things just seem to be against me? Case in point, Joseph. Look at what happens with Joseph. From an earthly point of view, when you look at the life of Joseph there, Satan has just chalked up a victory. He's got him in prison. All the plans of Joseph, they're done for. When the jail door slammed shut, the devil thought, I got him exactly where I want him. But guess what? God said that first, because God had him there where he wanted him. It was God's hand that was doing it. Look into the scriptures. Paul in prison. John exiled to the Isle of Patmos. Lazarus with a virus or a disease that brought him to death. Surely all this is a mistake. It's got to be a mistake. Well, Paul wrote most of the New Testament from prison. The letters of Paul were all from prison. John on the Isle of Patmos had the vision from God, which is the book of Revelation, and he wrote the John 1, 2, and 3. And Lazarus in the grave, that's a mistake, surely. No, it proved the greatest, or one of the greatest miracles ever seen. A couple of the writers have said the most unluckiest man in the Bible has got to be Lazarus. He had 4 days in heaven. And then some poor angel had to come around and say to him, Lazarus, it's lovely having you. But guess what? You're going back, but I don't want to go back. Well, I don't make decisions, but you're off. Gone. And perhaps, who knows up there? Who knows? Because remember when Jesus stood by the grave and he said, Lazarus, come out. Perhaps that was heard up there. And you're, what? And off he went. But it proved the wonderful, amazing power of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Intended evil with all those things that happened becomes ultimate good. Genesis 50, verse 20. You know Spurgeon, C.H. Spurgeon, he wrote these words. He says, I have learned more of God in my days of trial than in my days of ease. I've learnt more about God in those times. It's not easy though. It's not pleasant. The hurt is not nice. I mean, Psalm 105 as well describes Joseph. In verse 18 it says they put Joseph in prison. They bruised his feet with fetters and placed his neck in iron, and the Lord tested his character. This was boot camp. Short, sharp instruction. Why didn't God keep him out of prison? He could have, couldn't he? Could have kept him out of prison. Because, God knew the challenges ahead for Joseph. And prison was the place where he could strengthen his servant. Ouch. Nobody wants to be there though, do they? Not one of us want to be there. But what about you and me? Our troubles, our stresses, our anxious times, our pains, they're the things that God uses to make us more like his son and to mature us, to make him more like Jesus. Paul, as I say, wrote to the Roman church. He was in prison. He said in chapter 5 of Romans verse 3, tribulation works experience, and experience hope. When things are out of control, perhaps in our lives, we should trust the one who has never lost control. Trust him. So what was Joseph learning in his boot camp, in a crash course? I think he was learning leadership, because these men were coming to him with their dreams. They must have heard something about him, and when they said to him, we've had a dream, I wonder if his mind flashed back to the dreams that he'd had. Potiphar's house, now he had learnt things there, and now he's got these unruly, disrespectful, ungrateful prisoners. And he's looking after them. Remember, Joseph was abandoned by his brothers, sold into slavery, unjustly imprisoned. He could have gone into prison and sat in a corner and had his own pity party. He said, poor me. He didn't though. He took upon himself the butler, the compassion that this man showed. Because where he could be thinking about himself, these men came to him and he could have said to them, oh, go away. I don't want to know. I got my own problems. I don't need yours. I got enough on my shoulders as it is. Go away. He didn't. He actually went to them and said, why are you looking sad today? What's the problem? Well, I'm in prison. That's one. But then they come out, of course, with their dreams. And he gives both of them a truthful interpretation. The butler's got good news, the baker's got bad news. In 3 days, he said, as we read, the butler would be free. And in 3 days, I don't know how to put this, but you're going to be dead. He didn't hold that back. He could have put it a different way, couldn't he? But he didn't. He told the truth, the interpretation. You see, this was a test. I believe God was testing him here. He was going to be standing in front of Pharaoh, the ruler of the known world at that time. Was he going to buckle? Was he going to bend when he didn't know that Pharaoh was going to give him a dream? God did. Was he going to buckle and bend when he stood in front of the supreme leader? By what he told the butler and the baker, the answer was no, he was not going to bend. Do you know, like I say, he's in boot camp. Dismiss the thought from your mind. In whatever chapter of your life you're in now that might be troubling you, dismiss the notion that God has forgotten you. He's not forgotten you. On the contrary, he's never left you. Even though sometimes we can't feel he's there or sense he's there, he's never, ever left us. He sees tomorrow's needs, your tomorrow's needs, before you and me. He knows all about them, and he knows your struggles. How many times have we heard, he's the potter, we're the clay. He's moulding. He's making. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's difficult. He's the shepherd. We're the sheep. He's the teacher. We're the student. You could go on. Trust him. We can trust him. He will get us through it. He will. If God can make a prince out of a prisoner, do you think he can turn your situation around or mine? Do you think he can do it? Do you know, it was when Joseph he didn't focus on himself. When he was in prison, he focused on other people's needs, those around him, especially the butler and the baker, the two that are mentioned. And it's when we focus on others that we can then start to lose sight of our own pity-party problems. Do you know, when you go, well, wherever it is, whether you go to the doctor's surgery and you sit there and you see people worse than yourself. I know I've told you before, when I was in hospital lately, when they took me in there, and I was in bed there, looking around me, I thought, I'm not as bad as these people. I was the only one in the ward that was able to walk around. And so you start then to take your mind off yourself and see others who are in desperate situations. When we focus on other people's needs, our own diminish. Remember, he's in you for 2 full years, at least. Probably a bit longer because of what had happened before. But he's in there for 2 years. He's forgotten. He's asked the butler, will you please put a good word in for me? Because, I'm in this prison. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm unjustly here. And he's forgotten. But all the time, God is at work. All the time. He never stops working. Lamentations chapter 3 verse 33 says, in the New Living Translation, God takes no pleasure in making life hard or throwing roadblocks in our way. Takes no pleasure in it, but he's working a plan out. He's working his will out. Paul, writing to the Philippian church, chapter 1 verse 6, he who began a good work in you will continue it till it's accomplished. He will continue it. Hebrews 13 verse 21, he is working in us that which is well pleasing to him, because he knows best. We think we do, don't we? We think we know best. But he really does know best. You know, every challenge, whether it's large or small, every pain, every tumble, God is using to make you and me into the person that he wants us to be. And we can trust him. We can trust him. He has never made a mistake. And he's not going to start with you and me. We can trust him. Even though the situation may seem chaotic. Trust him. He will get you through this. So what happens next? You're going to have to come back and find out. It won't be next week, unfortunately, because we've got visiting speakers. But the next available Sunday, I think, is in August sometime. But what happens next? But I'll ask you this question as we end, because this is what it's all about. How are you at waiting? How do you like waiting? You know, when you're sitting in, I love it when you're in McDonald's, in the queue, and you get to the front. I know a lot most go through the drive-thru now, but you get to the front and there's a person in front of you, and you've been there 10 or 15 minutes already. And the person gets to the front and says, you think in that time you'll have worked out what you want. Yeah? And why is it when you're in the doctor's surgery, the person goes in and you're in there forever. And you're sitting there. My appointment was 10:30. It's 20, 11, quarter to 11. It's going on. And the person comes out. And then they call your name. And you go in. And you're in there 2 minutes. And they check you out. They think, what's going on here? You're waiting. You're in a queue in the traffic. And there's a man there with a stick, with a round thing on the top, saying stop. And then he goes, like that, and you think, oh, I'm going. No, you're not, putting it back. His arm was getting stiff. And you think, this is all relying on him. And he's not looking at the queue has gone behind him. He don't care. How are we at waiting? Sometimes not very, very good. Well, we'll look at that next time, being in God's waiting room. Oh, sometimes very, very difficult. But God is in control. God has never, ever lost control. And you and I, we can trust him. Thank you all.